that time again, ladies and gentlemen, when you park your butts down and listen to the Off the Rails podcast, hosted by yours truly, the offrailgamer. Here we are then, listeners, episode 37, and to think when I started doing this I wasn't sure I'd make it to episode 3. For those who don't know, Off the Rails goes out once a fortnight on Spotify, Amazon Music and YouTube. It's a podcast in which I spend around 20 to 30 minutes talking about video games and video game related topics. And the best part is, it's free to listen to. Plus, if you're new around here, you've got somewhere close to 15 hours worth of previous episodes to listen to. And if I may say so myself, that's 15 hours of pure entertainment gold. If you look to the podcast episode description, you'll find links to all my socials because I'm not verified on any platforms, so I figured I'd help you find me elsewhere. You'll also see my email address there, but I'm sure we'll come back to that later. I want to keep the intro short this week so I can get straight to telling you all about what I've been playing recently. And what excitement! I actually uploaded some content to YouTube, and 2 weeks in a row no less. It's been kart season, as 3 weeks ago we looked to the PS2 and played some Bomberman Kart, where at the following weekend we played some Looney Tunes racing on the PS1. They're both kart racers, but not all kart racers are created equal, as we saw when we had a look at Woody Woodpecker Racing on YouTube maybe close to a year ago now. I think it was some time back. In fact, it was so horrible it probably wouldn't have been out of place in Season of Scare. But that's not one of the games we're addressing currently, so how did these two titles hold up? Well, initially, I thought we were going to have problems with Bomberman. I didn't have a copy of the manual to hand, and it wasn't X to accelerate. I soon learned that speed was controlled on the right analog stick, while the left analog stick is used for steering, and I think it was L1 to launch weapons. Once I had the controls figured out, I have to say, it's a really fun game. It effectively does what other games of this genre do, your Mario Karts or Crash Team racing games, but don't let that be a reason not to try Bomberman Kart for yourself. It's genuinely a fun experience that I think works as well today as it might have at the time. Looney Tunes Racing is by no means a pretty game, but in my opinion, that can be forgiven for 2 reasons. 1, it was released for the original PlayStation, so it's not a modern title, and 2, it's really good fun. You might get sick of hearing Marvin the Martian repeat the same line of shocked pessimism over and over again, but that aside, it's a really good kart racer, and I really like the weapon pickup mechanic. You don't just pick things up at random, all the weapons are visible on screen and carry a different value. As you race around the track, you pick up poker chips, and can collect them to pick up the weapons that have a higher price. It gives you, the player, greater control over your weapon pickups than other games. I've been playing some other games for YouTube, but some of those episodes haven't aired yet, so the only one I can talk about at the moment is Pandemonium, which went up at the weekend just gone. We stayed on the PS1 for this platformer. I'd never played it before, but I know fans speak very highly of it. It's challenging, and was made slightly more difficult by the fact my controller's D-pad kept making the character crouch when I was trying to run, but we got a few levels played, and I had a lot of fun with it again. It's one that I'd love to return to on the channel if I ever improve at it. I'm not sure what the storyline to Pandemonium is, if it has one, but I do like the way it plays. It's a pretty linear platformer, watching you primarily run from left to right, but where the path curves and some of the parts of the level move you between the foreground and the background, it kinda creates a 2.5D experience. A bit like one of my personal favourite platformers from the same era of gaming, Klonoa, which I have spoken about before, I know. Heck, Even after a first play, I think I can agree with everyone else that Pandemonium is a great game, and well worth a play for yourself if you ever get the chance. It's no longer news, as the update released a while back now, so I'll cover it here as one of the games that I've been playing. That is to say that in No Man's Sky you can now go fishing. I think you can get the multi-tool attachment from the Anomaly space station that you can summon anytime, anywhere. As you can tell from my uncertainty, I haven't done any fishing yet. Instead, I've been bouncing around the Euclid galaxy hunting after black holes in an effort to reach the centre of the galaxy. I understand doing so allows you to jump to a different galaxy, and that's exactly what I want to do. I've also been playing a more than healthy amount of Fruit Mountain. If you check out my YouTube and or TikTok, you'll see a moment I'm very proud of in which I merged 2 watermelons. If that doesn't mean anything to you, I'll let the video explain. And hey, why not drop a like and follow while you're there? I still haven't figured out a regular schedule yet, but on TikTok I'm currently streaming Rayman Raving Rabbids on the PS2. It's effectively a collection of minigames, but it's got a great sense of humour and we've been having a lot of fun with it. And to round out the segment, I've also jumped back into Stardew Valley. I started a new game, and it's currently winter, year 1. All the same, I've been making good progress with the community centre bundles, and the museum exhibition is less incomplete than when I first moved to Pelican Town as well. I've been quite a busy boy, haven't I? God of War! Before we wrap up the segment, I also continued my playthrough of God of War Ragnarok, but I didn't make a great deal of progress, so I guess we can move on to the main part of the show. I've previously drawn attention to a storyline underpinning the podcast series, the story of my life. We've covered the 8-bit with my earliest introductions to gaming through the Sega Master System and the Nintendo Game Boy, but today we'll explore the console that finally actually cemented me as a gamer. Christmas Day 1999. Jolly old Saint Nick got me a Sony PlayStation, which I still have and cherish to this day. And with my beautiful new console, I received 4 games: Doom, Mickey's Wild Adventure, V-Rally Championship Edition 2, and Monaco Grand Prix Racing Simulation 2. The first disc in was Doom, and I commenced blasting away the Hellspawn with my trusty pistol, but oh boy did it freak me out. I was only a little lad, and by the end of the first level I was physically shaking, but it didn't put an end to my relationship with the game, as I would go back to it time and time again over the years, though, as far as I ever got, I still haven't completed it. Something I may have to rectify on the channel someday. The second disc into my PlayStation was Mickey's Wild Adventure, which I thought would calm my nerves, but Level 2, the Mad Doctor, served only to infuriate. It's a pretty standard platformer from the time, but with the difficulty cranked all the way up. Essentially, you play as modern-day Mickey Mouse, as he existed in the 90s, revisiting his old cartoons, and you platform your way through them. In the first level, you run along the quayside and even hop over Steamboat Willie, where Mickey comes face to face with the very first incarnation of himself. Anyway, the other 2 games I got were racing titles, so I won't spend too much time on them. Saying that, I did enjoy playing around with the track editor in V-Rally, and once I started to get the hang of it, it was really cool how Monaco Grand Prix put you in the driving seat of a Formula 1 car. They're great games, it's just I don't have too much else to say about them, and there are other games in my collection I'd like to give more time to. One such game being Rayman, which is another tricky platformer, but the graphics are so bright, colourful and beautiful that it still looks absolutely stunning to this day. Rayman is a little bit like Alex Kidd, in that he's armed only with a punch, but Rayman's hands aren't physically attached to his body, meaning he doesn't have to be stood next to a foe to be able to hit them. As long as they're both on screen, that's good enough for our guy. And by the way, I said our guy as in the letter R for Rayman, not our. Rayman is a difficult game, but I popped it in recently and managed to get past the first boss, the big mosquito. I also like that there are other Rayman-like people, like the Tarzan guy whose modesty you helped to cover. It's been a long time since I played though, so I can only remember bits and pieces, like the Music Land, and the level in the dark where you can only see a small amount around our friend we're controlling. which when I put it like that makes this sound like a very unhealthy relationship, and I don't like the thought of that association with gaming. So let's move on, shall we? If you've been following me for any amount of time, you'll know that one of my favourite games is Road Rash, and it all started on my PS1 back when I was still in primary school. I frequently talk about the soundtrack on this game, but it was the gameplay that was the reason I sunk so many hours into it. On the face of it, you're just riding a motorbike away from the camera, but with traffic and street obstacles like trees and fire hydrants to dodge, there's a lot going on screen. Plus, your fellow racers will try to knock you off your bike by throwing punches, trying to kick your ride out from under you, or even trying to cave your helmet in with a blunt object. And if you take a tumble in front of a police officer, you'll be headed straight for a jail cell rather than the finish line. I learned that my favourite character to play as is Axel, because his weapon of choice is a bike chain, which I always felt did the most damage. Because that's the other great thing about Road Rash, is that you can send your opponents for a tumble too. It was pretty much just the right amount of violence without being gory that your standard 10-year-old couldn't not love. Heck, I still love it as much today as I ever did, and I'm more than 3 times the age when I first played. Back in the year 2000, the World Wrestling Federation was in its Attitude Era, and boy me was a fan. So it was that I just had to have the SmackDown games in my collection. Sure, the graphics aren't all that great, and you had to use your imagination to work out which wrestlers were on screen at times. Nonetheless, when the word smack appeared over your character's hit points box and you hit their finishing move, it was just as exciting as watching it on the TV. I think it was for my 11th birthday I had some mates round to play the new SmackDown 2 Know Your Role before watching Gladiator, which we'd rented from the local shop. Not only could you play as all your favourites, like Stone Cold, The Rock, The Undertaker, or even Steve Blackman and Al Snow, you could also go backstage taking your Falls Count Anywhere matches into the street, local bars and restaurants, or the toilets where you could crack your opponent's head through the sinks, breaking them off the walls. You could also recreate some of your favourite moments from the TV, like when The Undertaker threw Mankind from the top of Hell in a Cell. It really did feel like a simulation of what the superstars did to each other on the telly. And in season mode, you could agree to help wrestlers get the jump on members of the roster backstage, which would set up new feud storylines. To this day, I'd still have to rank these as some of the best wrestling games ever made, even if you do have to squint a bit to work out which one's Gangrel and which one's Mr. Ass. As a kid, I had a demo disc that featured gameplay footage, not even playable, of an almost top-down game featuring a little pirate ship, and this really piqued my interest and captured my imagination. I only added Overboard to my collection fairly recently. It's a puzzle game in which you navigate your ship past obstacles and enemies to reach the end of the level. But that's neither here nor there, because I didn't grow up with this title, so what am I doing talking about it at all then? Okay, calm down. What I grew up with was years of wonder at just what it might be like. And did it live up to expectations? Kind of. It's not what I dreamed up as a kid exactly, but it is pretty good. Let's look to the skies. As you know, Soviet Strike is one of my favourite games ever released to date, but I've spoken about it previously, and will probably give an episode to it in the future. Instead then, I'd like to talk about air combat. You play as a fighter pilot with the primary objective of shooting down other planes, but sometimes you'll be targeting ground-to-air artillery or buildings as well. As you complete missions, you earn money to buy other planes, like MiGs, F-16s, or stealth bombers. As a much younger gamer, I never got the hang of air combat, and I didn't think a great deal of it either, which is a genuine shame because returning to it as an adult, I've got a much greater appreciation for it. It's an excellent game, with a phenomenal soundtrack too, consisting of epic guitar solos, the likes of which you might hear in a Dynasty Warriors game. When you fly out, sure you'll be equipped with homing missiles which lock onto your targets, making it easier to down them, but you've only got so many, and after you've run out, you'll be relying on your machine guns instead. But they're not difficult to get the hang of, so you'll be okay if you keep your head and only pull the trigger when you're sure you've got them in your sights. One game I did spend plenty of time with as a youngster was Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back. As I recall, Crash's sister Coco has been kidnapped by the nefarious Professor Neo Cortex. You play as Crash and will travel through portals to different worlds on the hunt for our foe with the oversized forehead. In my opinion, the Crash Bandicoot games are some of the best platformers ever made, and having the most nostalgia for Crash 2 is kind of the gold standard by which I judge other platformers. You can run, jump, spin attack, and belly flop to break open crates, fend off enemies, and collect as many Wumpa fruit as you can lay your hands on. Just be wary of the TNT and Nitro crates. They're not your friends. The levels are varied, seeing you mostly run away from the camera so you can see what's coming ahead. You'll find bonus stages that play out as 2D side-scrollers, and there are some levels that have Crash running towards the camera, being pursued by a boulder or an angry polar bear or something. You'll also run through swamps, clamber over ancient ruins, and explore Arctic settings where you really need to watch your step as Crash slides about over the ice. And Crash isn't always on foot either, as he'll ride jet skis, and in some levels will mount polar bear cubs, or possibly a tiger kit, though that might be in another game, proving that 4 legs are faster than 2. Now, I'm not prepared to talk about the PS1 without mentioning one of my favourite games, which also incorporates my favourite peripheral, being the light gun. You know how much I love rail shooters, given it inspired the name for my channel and my podcast, so by now you must know that I'm going to wax lyrical about Time Crisis. Shirudo Garo has enlisted the services of mercenary Wild Dog, and together they are attempting to stage a coup and take control over Cercia by kidnapping the president's daughter and holding her to ransom. Little do they know, VSSE's top agent Richard Miller, aka You, is on the case. The bad guys are holed up in a literal fortress, and Richard infiltrates underground through a submarine. What's the submarine version of a hangar? Well, anyway, that. You'll dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge the hail of bullets sent your way, breaking cover to return fire. Oh, watch that fellow with the bazooka. Shoot him at the right moment, and he'll blow up the submarine. It's action sequences like that that really adds to the excitement of this game. It really does feel like you're in the shoes of Sean Connery, launching a one-man assault on the base of a supervillain and his private army. You won't just go up against men armed like yourself with a plain old handgun, as we've already seen. Some will carry bazookas, others machine guns. Some guards hold riot shields, so you'll have to be more accurate with your aim to take them out. You'll also take aim at men firing heavy artillery, and you'll also need to shoot down a helicopter or two as well. You're working against the clock. The game is called Time Crisis after all, and you need to clear stages before the timer runs out. Succeed, and you will end up in a showdown with Wild Dog, who will fall into stacks of explosives that he accidentally detonates when he lands. Don't worry too much, I have a funny feeling we'll be seeing him again someday. I'm not much into football, I never really have been, but I still had plenty of fun with FIFA 99 growing up. I've talked about this game in a previous podcast, and at the end of the day, it's a FIFA game, so I guess there's only really so much you can say about it. Some of the controls still haven't changed over the years, X to pass, square to lob, and circle to shoot on goal, but in FIFA 99, triangle was pressed to sprint, not to play a through ball. The game offered plenty to keep me entertained as a child, but not more so than NBA Showtime, NBA on NBC. I loved this game as a kid once I got the hang of the controls. I'm pretty sure I always played as the Chicago Bulls, but only because I knew next to nothing about basketball, save the team Michael Jordan played for, even if the player on the cover was wearing a Lakers vest. Confession time, I was well over halfway through scripting this episode when I realised we'd already covered the subject in episode 30, but I stuck in some different games this time, and I was testing you to see if you were paying attention, because I clearly wasn't. Anyway, I guess that'll do us. I'll try to come up with something original for 2 weeks' time. So I'll see you then, I guess. Bye, guys!